Mark is the technical director at OpenID, an expert in identity and access management, network security, and a true architect of solutions that make complex systems simpler, faster, and more effective. But beyond all the technical expertise, Mark is someone who deeply cares about making technology work for people and society. Today, he's joining us here in Brazil for his first time to share his thoughts on open finance, OpenID, and the role of security in building more interoperable financial systems.
A very passionate believer in the use of technology. And technology can be used very strongly to deliver societal benefit. It can give people much greater access to resources of all sorts. It can really speed up the velocity of things they want to get done. It can take away tasks that are not interesting. But we need to deliver it in a way that retains appropriate confidentiality. It provides privacy where it's appropriate. And people can be confident to use it without unexpectedly bad things happening.
Welcome to another podcast here, Finance of Tomorrow, second edition in Rio de Janeiro. And I am joined to talk about probably my favorite topic, where I spent 15 years of my life. And Mark has dedicated Mark is a technical director of OpenID Foundation. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Bianca.
It was amazing having you here. We had a wonderful conversation in our panel, which I'll bring some of the topics later. But let's start with the basics. What's OpenID Foundation?
So the OpenID Foundation is a non-profit technical standards body. We have spent many years as a group of members, so it's mainly member-led, developing great technical standards. It started from the digital identity space, hence the OpenID name. And it's kind of grown from there. It's turned out that the technical standards that we've developed have got a really powerful applicability in financial services. And it's not just about sharing identity data, but sharing access to financial data as well.
Identity is a topic hard to define that often gets esoterical, and working groups have historically set up standards, but industry collaboration, where are we in the world of OpenID? Where are we in the world of open standards there? I know we can have a lecture and a really long podcast, but we'll try to give you the short version of it.
There's a broad range of pieces of work going on now. We started off, I'll try and do some of this from memory. I've got a little mind map down here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's walk through this mind map.
So I'm going to try actually and just pick out some really key working groups first of all. So there's two kind of community kind of engagement environments that we provide within the OpenID Foundation. And we do that to provide a place where conversations can happen without the risk of identity theft or abuses. It's a very collaborative space. We have legal agreements in place so that nobody can individually make off with everybody else's contributions. It all becomes OpenID Foundation non-profit IPR essentially. So that's a really important part of our organization. I know it's not very interesting, but it protects everybody from any individual kind of overstepping the mark. And what's happened is that we've expanded out the working groups where the technical specs are developed to cover a wide range of different topics. The core is called AB Connect for all sorts of esoteric reasons.
Okay. Which we can get into maybe later.
Yeah, if you want to go into the naming history of bits of OpenID Foundation work, that's a particular fun topic of mine. So yeah, there's a core kind of OpenID Connect working group, and they focus on incubating some of the work that then has been spun out into other working groups. So because it's financial services here, we spent quite a lot of time talking about the FAPI profile. That's one of our key kind of products that delivers into open finance, open data contexts. That was started in the original AB Connect working group, and then they spun out a dedicated FAPI working group to develop that properly back in around 2015, 2016
Wow.
as part of Open Banking UK.
Yeah. And where are we now in the usage of these standards? Because like ID is something that we know fundamentally is broken, was really never thought about it in the first place. When we look at the technology stack today, we went in quite deep during our panels. Mark was shared with some of the largest banks and the Federal Reserve of Brazil, talking about just the nuances when you start to talk about identifiable attributes. And you break down identity by context, by custody, and by intelligence, which we had several moments of explaining, identity is more than me just authenticating or proving, is ability and license to act.
Yeah, and making sure that the parties who are receiving the data are legitimate as well, that we protect the confidentiality of the data, that we only provide the minimum data required to satisfy a use case. These are all very important factors. As you say, it can get pretty complicated. The OpenID spec itself is the one that's focused on delivering, OpenID Connect, I should say, is the one that's responsible for delivering identity attributes from some provider to some consumer of data. And that's highly flexible, and it came out of the big tech space, but has now been implemented in lots of different contexts. So we see that in almost every enterprise now, like billions of users using it every day. When I'm talking to people outside of this industry, I say, do you log into Google? Do you log into Microsoft? Even like Xbox, do you use PayPal? Every time you log in, you're using OpenID Connect. But now that's expanding out into the richer and more complex use cases as well. There is a huge piece of work that's been going on for the last couple of years in the identity space, but with a slightly different approach from OpenID Connect, whereby a user-held wallet is actually an intermediary in the process of delivering the identity attributes from A to B.
As we kind of thought about I want to double down into that, because a lot of the times when you think of identity, I'm always and we talk about buzzword bingos of AI and data, I'm like, did we need to rethink everything like DNS but for people? And then if the world is kind of like that, what is the wallet custody structure like? So tell me a little bit more about this piece of work.
So this is driven out of a more user-oriented approach to handling identity attributes. And there have been multiple efforts to achieve that. There's still effectively a number of competing standards in this space. I would say there's two major projects going on around us at the moment. The big one is the European Union EUDI, or European Union Digital Identity Project. The OpenID Foundation has a working group that's delivering specs, and that's one of the major target environments. They've got legislation going through at a European level and then down to member state implementing acts that's going to require this towards the end of next year. And the work that the Digital Credential Protocols Working Group, yes, it's a bit of a mouthful, DCP for short, is doing DCP, is doing is to deliver the communication protocols from the issuer of a credential into the wallet, and then from that wallet out to whoever needs to consume it, called a verifier or a relying party, depending on your preference of terminology. Mm-hmm. So we're working quite closely with implementers in European countries and with some of the kind of Europe level responsible parties to develop this.
And a huge change on that, and a huge expedite on that. When we look at tokenized deposits, and we look at Mika passing already in Europe, when we look at the entire wallet infrastructure, do you think we will have, and is your hope that we will have a truly interoperable European identity?
That would be a lovely outcome, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we do need to probably have another one or two steps forward. I don't think it's possibly mature enough yet. I'm not quite sure when it's going to be mature enough. I think currently there are some specific use cases that are being focused on. But
tell people a little bit about those, like high level of like what are some of the use cases that maybe just illustrate what you're working on.
In that context, and this isn't my specialist area, I could point you to more better informed people on this one. But the European nations are being required to deliver a thing called a personal ID or PID, and that has certain specific identity attributes contained in it. And there are certain use cases, which I don't remember the list of because it's not my special area.
No worries.
Some financial services, I can't remember all the rest, where that has to be acceptable. But it's quite particular to those use cases. I think as we expand out into wider parts of the economy using this, and we need to deal with the complexities of cross-border, partly between European states, but more to other countries outside of Europe. There's going to be another level of complexity that needs to be dealt with because of it's all very well having interoperability within one, broadly speaking, consistent regulatory domain, but then delivering the necessary metadata about how an identity was assured, and all of the other pieces of information needed becomes significantly more complicated because the rules are different in different jurisdictions, essentially. So I think we're still on the journey. I really wish that project well. If they can get it done in Europe, that's a huge step forward.
I feel like that would be a huge step forward when we haven't seen an identity that works decentralized with centralized protocols, right? Like we haven't experienced that. So walk me through your mind map of where else OpenID Connect works. Because I see a financial institution and a bank here, and I see a world of open data.
Because we're at Finance at Tomorrow, obviously I wanted to kind of connect the work that we do in the OpenID Foundation through to the financial services sector.
So take us on that journey.
So the really significant kind of inflection point was when Open Banking UK decided to go forward to solve their competition and mergers authority requirements to shared data and use OpenID Connect and OAuth2, which is an underpinning protocol, as the communication protocol to base that solution on. And through the banks and the fintechs and the regulators and the open standards people, that's what led into the financial API profile of OpenID Connect. Now, again, another geeky kind of terminology thing. It's not called the financial API profile anymore because we've realized it's actually very applicable to other sectors. It's about securing data in transit,
securing data in transit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to
which data's in transit all the time. Data's in transit right now as you're watching this podcast or listening.
What FAPI does is it enables the end user to be in the loop and intentionally authorize the sharing of data or access to a functional API like a payment, for example. And so we took OAuth2 and OpenID Connect and we put all of the necessary work into tightening up the security around that to make it good enough for the UK financial services sector. They're fairly hot on security, as you might hope.
Yeah, as we have heard.
Yeah. So that's essentially that big step that took OpenID Connect much more firmly into that multi-party ecosystem financial services domain. Over time, we've built on that. We've discovered other areas where we need to add additional features and we need additional standardization. So over time, there's been some additional kind of companion specifications come in to look after little dark corners that apparently needed, or they definitely did need attention. So things like rich authorization requests.
Rich authorization requests,
yeah.
Okay.
That's a mechanism for describing rich authorization, funnily enough. And then there's another one called grant management, which is allowing the fintech to actually revoke elements of its authorization, which is a good thing from a security perspective.
A huge thing.
Yeah.
A huge thing from relationships, from how you build products, how you look at this asymmetry. I think I got into the identity game wanting to understand, why do I give so much and get so little?
Yeah. But this also allows the fintechs themselves to be good citizens and revoke their own rights when they no longer need them. So it's not about the end user revoking that permission. It's about the fintech who's been granted access being allowed to revoke their own stuff. So anyway, this has grown out into, it started off with, account information and payment APIs in the open banking UK context. It's grown much more into open finance or a wider set of financial products. The Australian regulators looked at what we were doing in the UK and decided they wanted to do a similar technical solution, but with more of a focus on the data side of it. So they did
their consumer data rights.
That's right, the CDR project down there. But essentially using very, very similar technical solutions. And now what we're seeing is that there's other neighbouring areas that need attention.
Such?
Why I brought the mind map was to remind myself of those neighbouring things that we're working on today. So one thing that has been being developed in the OpenID Foundation and came out of one of our member contributions is a thing called the Shared Signals Framework.
Okay.
And the idea behind that is that after that transaction to share data or whatever, the organizations within the ecosystem might detect something changing and might wish to inform each other. It might be important to know that a credential has been revoked. Or
Absolutely. I think fraud would have taught us that 1,000 times over.
Yeah.
In a game of non-zero sum.
So we have this idea that going forward, we can build on the work that's been done that looks at the kind of technical events that are covered by the Shared Signals Framework at the moment. That went final last week, I think, or the week before. But we can, because of the extensible nature of that, we can add new classes of signals to that protocol as well. So we have a standardized protocol for communicating events securely and in a data minimized fashion between parties in an ecosystem. I think we should look to that as the next step for addressing some of the fraud risks that come with the easy transfer of data.
Absolutely. And as we look, like in Brazil, we're in a hot market. Fraud is like on the news every 5 minutes. Yeah. And we forget to talk about proportionality, right? Like these crazy numbers of billions of dollars or $700 million that hit the news being like, okay, vulnerability. And then you see this entire authentication, identification industry coming in and saying, this is what we need. And me as an identity person, understanding how they make money, I'm like, that is not what we need. We need an understanding of why we're setting the controls in the first place and what information and how are we sharing it. So when I look at the Shared Signal Network or protocol, sorry, did I get my
Shared Signals Framework?
Shared Signals Framework. I'm going to build like a Jenga, like buzzword bingo game at one point and quiz like the industry and all these acronyms because I find that fun. When looking at this, you look at the opportunity to make viable what people were talking about when open data becomes open everything. Because right now you have like open finance over here, open insurance over here, open whatever over here, as if these were not connected inherently at source, origination, delegation, custody. So how do you see that implementation kind of helping a bit of this problem? And then if we like buzzword bingo AI to the mix, right? This just gets exponential. I know you said we already have these problems, which I tend to agree.
We do, I think. I think shared signals is it's not just a way of addressing, unhappy paths at a macro level. Yeah. It is done at on a per subject basis. So while implementing this can address those big kind of ecosystem level risks, it's also about addressing and being able to address individual unhappy paths. So if, Should we use the example of your mom or the driving, the one that we talked? Is that an unhappy path example you can use? The driving. Oh, yes. Yeah, right? That was a great example. Yes. Because I think that it illustrates the shared, right? we should probably signal when things are not the way they should be, right? And the example that Bianca's referring to, I think when we had the panel, was that I have an elderly relative who has very good eyesight. They're old, but they've got very good eyesight. So one of the main requirements for driving a car is that you have very good eyesight.
One of the attributes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this individual has other health challenges, which means they're not really conscious of the world around them very much anymore. And I really don't think we should be allowing them to drive a car, even if they can see very clearly. They don't really understand a lot of what they see. So, having a mechanism for communicating that between entities. I mean, we don't really share that stuff digitally at the moment, and it's a healthcare kind of environment, but crossing over into, I guess, the driving licensing domain to some extent. We haven't digitized any of that. I guess in the future we may.
Absolutely real, right? Like we look in Brazil and other countries, there's lots of digitization. Like I think everybody who sat here was like, we're going to tokenize and digitize everything from your mother to the table. And here's what's going to happen in legislation. And here's what's going to happen on products. And often this notion of like ownership, custody, information, integrity of data.
Appropriate sharing.
Exactly. That's what I'm super keen to understand and see evolve in the industry. I think our conversation, our topic is not yet main stage, and it should be. It should be main and center. Like you can't build things for people and talk about AI being some sort of buzzword bingo that's going to fix everything.
Yeah. So the mention of AI again brings me over to another bubble on my mind map, actually.
Go.
So,
what next bubble do we have?
It's sort of related to the metaphor we were talking about before, where how do you handle delegation? There's an important difference between impersonation and delegation in my own mental model of the universe. Impersonation is where you can't tell that it's a different entity acting. And delegation is where you're being much more explicit about another party being allowed to act for you. And at the moment, in almost every case I've come across, it's impersonation that happens. So if although there's a few in the legal realm, there's a few differences. So you could say that if we're talking about power of attorney for an elderly relative or for a young person, then that's explicit in the kind of legal and regulatory realm. But we don't really have good ways of representing that when dealing with a bank or dealing with a healthcare provider in the digital domain.
Or dealing with a video game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the whole child protection thing is another really
important. It's a whole other
topic. We
won't have time for this podcast, but we could do a follow-up.
I've got a great person to come and talk about
Send
that
him
for
my
you.
way.
So,
okay, lovely.
Somebody who's really working at that intersection of identity and child protection and the consequential financial risk as well. So
huge. They're so beyond just financial risks. But okay.
Yeah, of course. But that's a whole other story, right? So 3 or 4 years ago, the working group that I co-chair, which is called EKYC and IDA, by the way.
EKYC and what?
IDA.
IDA.
And we got the double-barreled name because in financial services you call it EKYC and in government you call it IDA. So we couldn't resolve
So you were
those.
like, we're doing both things. So if the two of you can't figure out what to call it, we call the both things together.
Exactly, yeah.
This is like a perfect example of how we just have too many hybrids. That's okay.
So anyway, one of the things that we've started tackling in that working group is how to much more explicitly represent that delegation happens. And when it happens,
what's the winning solution for this ginormous problem?
We haven't fixed that yet,
okay.
But we're working on it.
Well, you can join the working group
yes.
if you'd like to know. Okay.
So we have a range of interested parties in that. There's people coming at it from the finance sector. There's people coming at it from the healthcare sector direction. There's people coming at it from the child protections direction. Safety online and all that. We need to be really clear when these things are being delegated and what's being delegated and what the relationship is between those people. So current investigations are, can we define what is a relationship and what is authority? It's really exciting work in working groups.
This is amazing work. Actually, this is amazing work. We're total nerds. We acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But this is amazing work when we think about a world where the tomorrow is going to be fully digital. And there's no question of that. We already live in that world. And the asymmetry that happens allows us to not understand and not to prosper. So...
But there's even other cases, if you could model things using delegation. If you phone up your banking call center and you delegate the call center operator to act for you. I think that's actually what happens quite a lot of the time.
For course. Yeah.
But it's almost never explicitly stated. Somebody who works in the call center has access to your data is pretty much how it's real world implemented today, isn't it?
Well, I had never thought about it that way, but I think that the notion of we've already given something that was inherently ours a long time ago. I feel like the barriers, and I think I often have these philosophical discussions or technical discussions with privacy professionals in terms of like, how do you redefine privacy if I don't even know who has my stuff where?
Yeah. And it reminded me very strongly of the conversation we had on the panel on Monday, actually, with the auditing guy. I can't remember his name. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, Gladson Pompeu, Tribunal de Contas Federal, the auditor of the financial government of Brazil, was here talking a little bit about this.
I was very, very pleased to hear him talking about transparency in this space.
Me too. That's why he was here.
Yeah.
He's the auditor and saying that there's got to be some checks and balances happening here. Mark, is this your first time in Brazil?
Yeah, my first time in South America.
Wow, what a moment in time. How's the experience been for you other than welcome to my city?
Great.
And how was Finance of Tomorrow?
It was great too.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Are we ending?
Okay.
I've got another whole bubble to share.
Tell me, you have one more bubble?
So
Go.
I kind of referred to it, the identity assurance side of things.
As we navigate through the buzzword bingo, acronyms, working groups, tough concepts, we have one more bubble. We talked about this, identity assurance.
Yeah. So this has been one of my main jobs in the OpenID Foundation with my pro bono side, leading the working group, delivering a new spec for identity assurance. So we know
what is identity assurance.
Well, I was going to go there.
Let's just start there.
So,
I like basics. I know the lingo, but maybe some of you don't.
So we know you're Bianca, yeah, but sometimes for maybe regulatory reasons or risk mitigation reasons, we want to check that. So commonly, that's based on some documentary evidence.
Correct.
Or maybe
in Brazil, we call it cara crachá.
Okay. So what we've built is effectively a data structure which hopefully is flexible enough to represent all of the evidence and the processes used to check that evidence and so do validation of the evidence itself. And I say evidence, not documents, because it can also support other forms, not just documents.
So it can support other data forms of identification.
Yeah, so we have...
or attributes that are actually identification. This is amazing because this fixes problems of people that are unidentified because of a problem with evidence-based.
Of course. So we have documents as one class of evidence, electronic records as a second class of evidence, and vouching as a third class of evidence.
I'm a huge fan of vouching. The people that know me out there, like... the idea, vouching shows in social graphs and in social networks, like the entire infrastructure actually works. And when you look at Brazil as an example, and you look at the depressed demand for credit, you can go back to learnings from Nobel Prize in India and understand that vouching is a system of not only trust data, but ability to actually establish context and relations.
Yeah. And, if you are able to use... trusted parties, then vouching can be stronger than just the social networks. It can be more official vouching.
Correct.
We have it sort of codified in UK guidelines. We have a UK government document on vouching, and it gives you a list of the professions that are allowed to act as vouchers in the UK context. So yeah, that's one of the places that we took inspiration from.
That's
for
amazing.
This. But the
industry has a lot to do in this space.
Yeah.
A lot to do in KYC, a lot to do in just like maybe look at tokenized deposits and active deposits or fractionalization. Like if you don't have some of these vouching mechanisms for some of the data, some of the products just they're not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just not going to work.
The other reason that we really need it is because there's so much difference between different jurisdictions. So it could be between different industries or different verticals, or it could be between different countries. And I think that we're going to need the fidelity of, how did you actually assure this person is who they claim to be? We can't just trust that you did it. We kind of need to know how you did it. So this data structure that we've standardized hopefully is flexible enough to reflect all of the variability of the different evidence and the different processes that go on all around the world into something which is at least computable. There's still defining what your acceptable policy is another step, but at least if we've got a standard format to represent it, it's a big step forward. So we finalized that spec, I think October last year. We've got a little bit more work to do on that. So there are quite a number of extension points there. The definition of the legitimate values for different types of pieces of evidence, and the definitions of the processes. So there's validation of the evidence. It could be cryptographic checking of a signed object, or it could be that you have a trained professional reviewing a passport in person, or all those sorts of things are important. So we've still got a kind of a data job to go through to say, here's how you interoperably describe a passport check. But we do both the validation of the evidence and then the verification of the relationship between that evidence and the person is all covered in this spec as well.
And when are we hoping to see this spec? I saw the fingers crossed. I'll make fingers crossed as well.
Yeah, so the spec's out there ready to be used.
So people out there, they're wondering or thinking they can integrate, what can they do to?
So it's a freely available specification on the OpenID Foundation website. Go and look for identity assurance. There's a search button. If
they think there's something wrong with it, they can come tell you to go be in a working group
and tell us where we got it wrong, or where we missed a bit, or where you'd like to fill in a blank. That would be the real sweet spot for me. Come and help us build the bits we've missed, or the bits we left intentionally blank because we didn't have all the answers. So yeah, and I think this is going to be important, as I say, for cross-border reasons, basically, and cross-industry.
And as you look at this hope for the future, you dedicated your life to a lot of this, and what could we hope for if some of these standards are actually used worldwide?
The very short version is easier to integrate, also known as cheaper and quicker delivery of solutions in the digital domain that reduce risk. Is that enough? I guess it is.
Absolutely.
I don't have too big an ambition, do
I? No, it's just a ginormous ambition, but no big deal. How do we fix humanity and access? That's kind of what the core of identity is.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not just me. We have 400 or 450 members who are all adding their little bit to the work of the OpenID Foundation across all of the working groups. The other point that we didn't touch on, we talked about briefly AI here and there and delegation. There's two kind of threads that we're pulling on there around AI. One is a question about, is AI just another form of delegation, or the agentic AI just needing another form of delegation? And the other is we have a community group, which is more of a kind of industry talk environment rather than delivery of specs. We have an agentic AI community group going in the OpenID Foundation as well, that's getting quite a lot of kind of interest at the moment. It's fairly young. There's lots of work to do there, but it's bringing together people from the kind of agentic AI community and the digital identity community to look at how best to address the challenges that exist there.
And how not to replicate the problems in just exponential amount of data, right? And I think that's what, when people say the AI give you new problems, is it going to break identity? I was like, identity was broken to begin with. So we're just dealing with a different level. And I think when we look at the fraud prevention and the vectors, then certainly for sure.
Yeah, and the generative AI side of it is problematic as well, but we're focusing on the agentic AI side, and it's another one where I think we need to be more explicit about when there's an agent, and I think also more explicit about when that agent has been delegated to do something. What has it been delegated to do? We need to be clear about that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think clarity is something the financial services market tried, but technology left us with the whole world of Mad Max. So a bit of the part of like my purpose for founding, and I'm super grateful that you're here. I hope next year at Finance of Tomorrow, we can bring part of these 400 associated members of OpenID Foundation to help explain to all these people with crazy ideas and technological active tokens that if we don't fix the basis, we're just going to build a bit of a more asymmetric and less accessible world.
Yeah, and it's going to result in risk for people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm doing my little bit to try and avoid.
Absolutely. We're grateful. I'm grateful that you came here, that you shared your story, Mark. Thanks for being part of Finance of Tomorrow. Thanks for being here in the podcast. We will leave Mark's information and OpenID's foundation information for you to share. And I promise to build a vernacular. It's been 5 years that some of my community has asked me to start building this vocabulary of all these acronyms. Maybe I take on the challenge now that I've heard Mark talk about the many things that he's doing to do that for the next year. Thank you so much for listening. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Enjoy Brio.
Yeah.
And we'll hope to see you next time.
Okay.